What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. It's your man, Josh Fernandez here, rolling solo this evening. Unfortunately, Mike Alexander couldn't join me. Um, Mike is dealing with some Mike related issues, but it's all good because I'm here with you tonight and we're going to look at a couple pieces pertaining to this week 9 NFL slate. Um, Pretty excited about this one, um, mainly because I have decided to look at things a little differently. I think than some people may be looking at things, but it's pretty close to what I've been doing. If you've been paying attention during the MLB season, which is looking at ownership movement. So, without further ado, let's look at these games and then look at some ownership movement, and then, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat there. Um, I'll do my best to give you my opinions on what you're asking, and by all means, fire away. So let me see here. I'm going to switch this stream over to the. I'm going to switch this thing over to my screen. Can I do that? I don't even know if I can do that. Oh boy. All right. I guess I can't. Okay. That's fine. So looking at the Vegas lines, a few things stand out to me tonight. We still have 36 hours, roughly, maybe a little more, 40 hours until the games kick off. So a lot can change between now and then. But your implied totals, you got a few teams that are at the 30-point mark, and for those of you that don't pay a ton of attention to implied totals, it's not the end all be all metric, but it is very important to note which teams are over 28, 29, 30 points. And we got a bunch of them this week. The first team that stands out to me is the Rams. The Rams are moving up. They are just a hair under 30 points, 29.8 implied total. They're the only team of the four I'm about to mention who's seen an upwards movement from the open. The Rams have moved up almost a point from their 29-point open. They're flirting with 30 points. I think that they get over that 30-point mark. According to Chris Raybon, who has done a lot of research on macro trends, the big trends with all the years and years of data, anytime a team sees 30 points implied at the time of kickoff, tends to return massive value for a number of players. So this is a very stackable team in the Rams. And like I said before, the Rams are a fun team to use. They're a team that you can feel really comfortable with using because they're very predictable. A lot of usage for those receivers. You don't really have to worry about any ancillary receivers getting any sneaky usage. We're not going to worry about Josh Reynolds this week. He's out of the picture because Cooper Cup is back. So feel free to use Brandon Cooks. Feel free to use Cooper Cup, and obviously Robert Woods, Todd Gurley, as always, and Jared Goff is an outstanding GPP quarterback. Um, Maybe even Cash, though we'll get to the other guy that I'm really into this week in just a minute. Um, but I think this might be a pay up week at quarterback. We don't really have Case Keenum going against the Chiefs this week. So, you know, consider paying up a bit at quarterback when the time comes for you to determine who you want to roll with. One thing I do want to mention about the Rams, this is a revenge game for Brandon Cooks. So if you buy into things of that nature, then keep that in mind. The other team is your Kansas City Chiefs going against the Cleveland Browns. Um, what else is there to say? The Chiefs are a fantasy factory for points. So Patrick Mahomes obviously doesn't take a genius to recommend him. Um, but all the other pieces, it's not always easy to nail down. Is it going to be Travis Kelsey? Is it going to be Cheetah? Is it going to be, Sammy Watkins or one of these other guys that are sneaking in there for the touchdowns? That's the difference between the Chiefs and the Rams. Both are high powered, high octane offenses. Problem is that with the Chiefs, can be more of a guessing game when it comes to their skill players. So just keep that in mind if you determine the Chiefs to be your uh, 30-point and up implied total team of choice. Um, Definitely feel more comfortable with the Rams skill players if you're going to be running some one offs or what have you. So it's just something you have to determine, what your risk aversion is. Are you more interested in some safety with Rams players, or are you willing to pay down a bit for some of these Chiefs players? You get some more value there sometimes, but it's up to the user ultimately. And then two other teams that we typically don't think of this year like the Rams and the Chiefs. The first one's the Patriots. The Patriots are all they're scoring points in bunches. They're a team that isn't as sexy as the Rams and Chiefs, but they still, are a devastating team on the scoreboard. So I have no problem using guys like James White. I don't know about Rob Gronkowski, but at some point he's going to have a big game this year. I don't know when. His red zone usage this year is pathetic. It's really concerning. Josh Gordon's a little banged up, but is he banged up or is he banged up? I don't know. Not really sure. Um, and then other guys like Sonny Michelle. Again another guy who's a bit banged up. Tom Brady, obviously. Patriots, not the sexiest team. Julian Edelman as well is an interesting guy compared to the Chiefs and the Rams, but they're the slate leading at the moment uh, team for implied total at 30.8. And then finally, the team that's going to be the mega chalk this week is the Carolina Panthers going against Tampa Bay at home. Cam Newton is going to be 20% owned. Book it. I guarantee it. He is going to be so heavily owned after carving up the Baltimore Ravens last week. This week he gets a cupcake defense in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have no problem using Cam Newton in any format. He's been a beast this year. He, as far as I'm concerned, is their number one rushing option. The Bucks are getting destroyed by opposing passers to the tune of, I believe, last I saw was 20 touchdowns to one interception this year. Um, so guys like Devin Funches, DJ Moore, Greg Olson, awesome options at pass catcher. You got some certainty now um, with Torrey Smith, who's going to be sitting out this week. Not having to worry about him taking away some looks there in the passing game. Christian McCaffrey is going to be an awesome option to use. Nice floor there for McCaffrey, but it all starts with Cam. For me, I love Cam Newton. I put him in there on Monday morning. That's my routine as I'm driving to work and I'm sitting in traffic like a dope. Hopefully, that's not you for your Monday morning commute. Hopefully, you don't have to sit in traffic for 50, 60 minutes like yours truly. But it gives me some time to think about the decisions I made the day before. Now that I have a clear mind, now that I have some time to think about it. And of course, I like to build my week upcoming lineups and get my first looks in there, leave it for a few days, and then kind of process things on Wednesday, Thursday, when a lot of ownership projections come out. We'll get to that in just a minute. But Cam Newton's been in there since day one. I'm really pumped about using him this week. I see no reason why I'm going to pivot off of him unless something comes up. We'll talk about some quarterback options here in a minute, but I'm loving some Cam Newton. Then some other teams that are worth noting as far as implied total goes. You got the Saints, of course. The Saints, their implied total has tanked from 31 down to 27.8. That's a pretty significant drop to 10% drop roughly. So keep that in mind. I know a lot of people are going to be into Alvin Kamara this week. Don't think that's a bad call whatsoever. They might be playing catch up on the road, going out west, playing or I'm sorry, what am I talking about? They're not going out west. They're playing in New Orleans. So, who interesting. Okay, I don't know what I was thinking there. Hold on, let me do something here. Take a sip of my beverage. Okay, now I'm thinking more clearly. Um, yeah, so the Saints. Gotta love the Saints. Traquan Smith is an interesting pay down option there at wide receiver, 5,100 on FanDuel. You know, Mark Ingram, I'm not too crazy about him this week, to be honest with you. He's going to be really game script dependent. And I don't think that he's going to fit into that game script, though, in a cash game uh, sense, but in a GPP sense, I don't see any reason why you can't get a few percentage points ownership of Mark Ingram, 5, 6%. If you're feeling ballsy, 7, 8, 9%. But over that, I think that's a little too much because his salary is a bit out of my interest range. The Minnesota Vikings going against the Lions, they're going to be a fun team to use. I know that Dalvin Cook is coming back, but Latavius Murray, signs point to him still getting the rock. He's been beasting out lately, paying off his salary every single week. And I think he could be an option again. Just tread lightly. I really wish Dalvin Cook wasn't coming back this week because I would really love to use him because some of these higher priced running backs they're not as certain as they were last week. Your James Conner, your Joe Mixon, I mean to a slightly lesser degree, Kareem Hunt. Obviously, Todd Gurley last week was easy smash in there, get those top price running backs in. But this week, I think, there's arguments to be made for dropping down a little bit to the Adrian Petersons. Um, obviously the Latavius Murrays at a tick below that. There's some more options that we'll get to in a bit. But the Vikings are interesting. Obviously, Adam Thielen is a fantastic option. And Stephon Diggs has slate breaking ability. And then I'll just close it up here with the Packers in a shootout at 25.8, potentially a shootout visiting New England Sunday night. So if you are playing the fantasy draft slates, you are playing the full week slates, then keep those two teams in mind. But you know what? We're not doing that. We are not playing the full Sunday slate. We're playing the main slate only, so disregard any comments I made on Green Bay and New England. And then the Redskins taking on the Falcons at home. Redskins are implied for 25 points. The only guy I'm really interested here on the Redskins side of the ball is Adrian Peterson. After that, it's a complete crapshoot. But AD is an awesome option on them Redskins. And then if we sort here, I wish I could show you my screen. Unfortunately, I can't. I don't know why. It kind of sucks. If we sort here by implied total movement, some of your movers right now, obviously the Rams I mentioned, but some movers are the Chargers moving up a point and a quarter to 24 and a quarter. They're taking on the Seahawks in Seattle. That's an interesting game there. Melvin Gordon obviously has 3 touchdown potential. The question is he fully healthy and is he ready to go in a very tough matchup with that Seattle defense? And then if you do think that Carolina is going to get out to a lead, then that means that Fitzmagic is going to be throwing the ball, chucking the rock a lot. 24.5 point implied total for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, I don't see any issues with Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin. I prefer him more in like more of a guaranteed shootout environment. But Fitzpatrick, I see no reason why Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't throw for 300 yards. I mean, just based on the way he was playing earlier in the year. And he looked really good last week, but that's kind of his MO is come in as the replacement for the quarterback who's sucking and go balls out, crush it for a week, 2, 3 weeks, and then turn back into the pumpkin, after he's been Cinderella for a few weeks. So I think we're good for a couple Cinderella weeks of Fitzmagic. So I feel good about him too. Enough of these games. Let's get to the fun stuff here. The fun stuff is the ownership situation. So here's what I've been doing. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I'm going to try to talk you through things here. If you are watching on the live stream, or you're watching on the the recorded live stream, I'm going to try to talk you through things. Again, I really wish I could show you my screen, but I don't want to mess around too much and waste your time trying to figure out how to do this. So here's what I'm looking at here. I've got Wednesday ownership projections. I'm not going to give out my source. I think that it's important that I keep that anonymous. The reason why is because I pay for these ownership projections. Um, I think they're the best in the industry. Let me take a sip of my drink. Ah, bourbon and Coke, baby. Bourbon and Coke Zero. The Friday night nectar of the gods after a long work week. So I go on to my ownership projection source and I pull what they are projecting on Wednesday. Wednesday is when they're released. I put that into a spreadsheet and then I don't look at it at all. And then I come back on Friday and I pull their updated ownership projections, put it into the spreadsheet. Um, and then I look at the percent change from Wednesday to Friday. And on top of that, I like to average the Wednesday ownership projection. I like to rank the ownership projections. So, for example, if the player is the highest ranked, then he will be number one. And if he's second, number two, and so on and so forth. I like to average the ownership rank for Wednesday, for Friday, and the percent change. So if a player has moved up from Wednesday to Friday the most, then he will be ranked one in ownership change. So what that does is it incorporates the Wednesday ownership projection, the Friday ownership projection, and the percent change from Wednesday to Friday. So what we're looking at not only is how heavily or not heavily owned is a player, and how much is he trending upward or downward, or is he flat in his movement? And I think it's important to look at it this way because that ownership projection change from Wednesday to Friday. And then on Sunday, I look at it from Friday to Sunday as well. And then I have a nice idea of, when where they were at Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and the change from Wednesday to Friday and Friday to Sunday. It incorporates the change because it incorporates momentum. And momentum is key because if the player is moving upward in ownership with high velocity, then that means something. There's a lot behind these ownership projections. I trust the masses more than anything. Um, I do think as a cash player, you should really pay attention to ownership projections. And as a GPP player, you should pay attention to them, but you want to look for lower owned guys who are trending up. So, case in point, if we're looking at quarterbacks, the highest owned projected owned quarterback for this Sunday is Cam Newton at 19%. He is a number one highest owned projected quarterback at this point. It was Patrick Mahomes on Wednesday. Cam was second. Mahomes has tanked. Mahomes went from 19.5 down to 9%, a 53.8% drop. So I'm not really sure what that means, but if there is one thing that it immediately makes me think is what is happening with Kareem Hunt. So Patrick Mahomes has dropped significantly. That's a huge drop. Does that mean that he's unplayable? Absolutely not. All it means is that we need to understand what is going on there. And Kareem Hunt, yes, he's dropped as well, 11% from 31.9 down to 28.4. But he's still holding strong as the second highest projected owned running back on the slate behind Todd Gurley. And if you can't afford to pay 11.2 for Gurley in your lineup build, you can definitely drop down to 8.5 for Kareem Hunt. And I do think that it is important to move with the masses with running backs. Running backs this year, especially, you got to get those high priced guys into your lineups. And so Kareem Hunt, as the third highest priced running back behind a hair behind Melvin Gordon, $100 less, and a pretty hefty amount behind Gurley, almost 3,000 less than Gurley. I do think that it's important to get these high priced guys in. And Kareem Hunt out of players like Kamara, McCaffrey, Melvin Gordon, um, James Conner. Uh, I guess you could throw Adrian Peterson in there, perhaps. I think that he is probably our surest bet going against the Cleveland Browns, who, we don't really know what to expect from them this week with the huge changes they've made. But if there's one thing we know is that Greg Williams um, does sell out to stop the run. So that is a little bit of a concern, but I think just the type of player Kareem Hunt is, he can mitigate that pretty easily with his skill. And if they want to sell out to stop the run, then that's only good for Patrick Mahomes. But based on the way this ownership is moving on Mahomes, I think that that's a huge boon for Kareem Hunt, and it's just a signal I'm looking at for him. But back to quarterback. Um, Basically, it's all about Cam Newton as far as I'm concerned. He's moved up almost 20% from 16 to 19. That's a very big jump upward. And based on my raw movement average of his Wednesday ownership, his ownership changed from Wednesday to Friday, and his Friday ownership, he's my number one quarterback. Only considering ownership projections and the movement of the ownership projections, he's my number one quarterback. I love him this week. I think he's a great play. And it's a very low likelihood that he's going to miss on giving you a 20 plus point day. Behind him is Jared Goff and Drew Brees. Both of these guys are neck and neck in what is likely to be a shootout environment with two of the higher scoring offenses in the NFL squaring off in what is known as kind of the Coors Field of NFL stadiums. So Jared Goff and Drew Brees facing off against one another. One or both of these guys is going to go bananas. I just feel like Cam Newton, he just has such a higher likelihood of returning an awesome game for you that it's really hard for me to get away from him this week. Sip time. Ah, yes. That's the hard part about not having Mike here, is I can't take my sips. I got to run my yapper. Otherwise, there's going to be dead silence on the airtime. But looking down at Patrick Mahomes, he is slated to be the third highest owned quarterback, or excuse me, the fourth highest owned quarterback. But with that drop in his ownership, it's a little concerning. I do think that we can chalk that up also to the fact that he is 9,500, and you're saving $1,000 going to Cam, Goff, Breeze. Um, so you really have to think about what you're trying to get out of the rest of your lineup. And if you can afford to get up to him and you think that he's got another 4 touchdown type of affair, in him for this week, then, feel free to jam him in there. But I just think we got such great quarterback play available to us this week in that mid 8K range. I just don't really see a reason to pay up for Mahomes this week. Not saying I don't like him, not saying I don't think he can put up 30 points. Um, but you know, I just think it's likelier that Kareem Hunt will put in a couple touchdowns, but oh, man, Kareem Hunt can score 2 touchdowns, run for 150 yards, and Mahomes can still throw for 300 with 3 TDs. So just tread lightly. And then right behind them is Ryan Fitzpatrick. So you've got Baker Mayfield as well at 7,400. Up a little bit more there is Ben Roethlisberger at 7,800. And I'll talk about him in a second. But Fitzpatrick, man, like 7,100, that's really cheap for a quarterback on FanDuel, especially one who has shown this year that he's got those 400-yard, 3 touchdown games with some rushing upside. He can get you 30, 40 rushing yards. And for those of you that haven't really thought about the meaning of 30 or 40 rushing yards, I mean, 40 rushing yards for a quarterback is equivalent to a passing touchdown. And Fitzpatrick has shown a willingness to run. And I think that that gives him a little bit of floor safety, not to mention the fact that the Bucks just want to throw, throw, throw. Yes, Peyton Barber has been turning it on the last couple weeks, but they're still a throw, throw, throw first team. So, I don't think it's that risky to go down to him at 71. But I just think these plays above him there with Cam, Goff, and Breeze are just such better plays. So, for what it's worth, my little model here has him and Mahomes both ranked sixth in the rank movement metric. Again, where we're ranking their Wednesday ownership, ranking their Friday ownership, ranking their movement from Wednesday to Friday, and then averaging them together. They are both tied at sixth. Also, right there is Ben Roethlisberger. So Big Ben has a really tough matchup with the Baltimore Ravens, but his ownership has spiked from 1.2% projected to 3.7. That's a 216% upward move. He's still projected to be 3.7% owned. He has a history of having bad games against the Ravens. This is a tough divisional matchup, and the Ravens want to bounce back after, frankly, being embarrassed by Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers on the road last week in Carolina. But I don't know, like that's interesting how much he has moved up over the last 3 days. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying play Ben. I mean, if you run 150 lineups, it wouldn't hurt to go overweight. He's projected at 4%, so maybe getting up to 8 and double the field. It'd be interesting to see where he winds up when it's all said and done. But I'm all about Cam this week. Moving on to running backs. If we sort by my movement rank, our number one guys are tied up there at the top. Latavius Murray and Christian McCaffrey are both tied. So it's a little concerning right now knowing that Dalvin Cook is going to be back, but I just don't see him coming in there and taking the job outright from Murray. Murray's just been so solid the last couple weeks. And I think that at 6,700, going against the Lions who can be gashed on the ground by opposing backs, um, yes, he's jumped from 9 to 14, which is a 59% upward move. However, I am interested to see where he winds up on Sunday. I could see him settling in down at like the 10, 11% range at projections. However, I think in the lower dollar tournaments, he's going to be in the single digits because I just don't think that the public, your typical players in lower dollar tournaments are going to go to Latavius Murray. So I think he makes for a fantastic GPP play, given the opponent, what he's done lately, and this ownership move, midweek. Just keep in mind that Dalvin is back and it could impact his upside, his ceiling a bit. But Christian McCaffrey, I mean, he's definitely going to be mega chalk this week. People love to use him. The public loves to use him. Um, from what I understand, a lot of sharp players avoid him on FanDuel because of that half point PPR element. But the nature of this game is such that, he's got 20-point potential pretty easy. I'd say out of 100 games, You could see McCaffrey getting upwards of 20 points, 2/3 of the time. I just love this matchup with Tampa Bay. And he really needs to get going here with a big time game. The last several weeks, I don't want to say he's had pedestrian outings, but nothing worth writing home about. So McCaffrey and Murray are the number one guys as of now on Friday. Again, interested to see where they're at come Sunday. I'll tweet out about it if I have the time. Uh, Moving down the list here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have two guys tied at 8. I'll get to them in a few. But Alvin Kamara is your number 3 guy. Kamara's moved up from 23 to 27. That's a 15% move. Adrian Peterson, however, right behind him at number 4, has gone from 4% to 7%, which is a 70% move. That is a monster move. That is the biggest move of all running backs outside of LaShawn McCoy, who's way down there at number 22. He went up from zero point 0.9 to 1.7%. That's an 82% move. So really, it's all about Adrian Peterson. And Chris Thompson's going to be out. Capri Bibbs is going to be out. So it's really just AD. It's going to be AD, all day, all day. The guy I think is a can't miss play this week. And I don't think that he's going to be heavily owned whatsoever. He's pretty expensive based on the perception of who he is. He's an older back on a boring team. But that's what the Redskins want to do. Like the Redskins want to be boring. They want to play 1997 football. They want to give their running back the their old school running back and Adrian Peterson just the keys to the car, so to speak, and let him drive. And so I think that he's going to, kind of have a resurgence, you know, put a put some emphasis on this renaissance. He had a really great game last week, and I think he's going to keep that momentum going. And that 70% move from Wednesday to Friday is huge, and I think that's a really big signal that he is a fine play this week. And I'd prefer, honestly, to play him over Alvin Kamara because we just really, just truly don't know, if Kamara is going to be the guy this week. Though at 8K, we don't really need that 9K production. I think 8K, you can stomach 20 points rather than, say, 26 points. So I wouldn't mind just going with Kamara and AD, whatever you want to call him. I think that's a nice duo. Honestly prefer both of them over Christian McCaffrey, but that's just me. Todd Gurley, dang, man, 11-2. Like, how the fuck are you supposed to get that guy in there if you want to pay up at quarterback, get just at least one moderately to high priced receiver and some higher priced running backs in there? It's tough. Definitely try to play around with it a bit. Don't sacrifice, too much of your upside just to get Gurley in there and get some garbage receivers. I mean, I do think that what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to try to get Gurley in there, and they're all going to gravitate to Traquan Smith and Cortland Sutton. I do like Cortland Sutton. I do like Traquan, um, but I just don't think that it really makes sense if it's so painfully obvious that so many people will do that. Um, that in tournaments you kind of should just get away from it. Like Gurley, I I like him in this game. I mean, it's hard not to like him in any game, but damn, man, like 11-2, like you really have to think hard about how you're going to get him in there and differentiate because I can guarantee you that Traquan and Sutton will be heavily owned and people's keys to getting Gurley in there with some other valuable pieces. So just keep that in mind. But below Gurley is Kareem Hunt, and Kareem Hunt's seen, like I mentioned before, kind of a bit of a drop there, at a 10.8% drop from 31 to 28, 32 to 28, really. And that's not really bothering me too much because he's still, again, slated to be the second highest owned running back. And if you take Gurley out of the equation, he's slated to be the highest owned running back. I can see, there being some more movement here as the days go on, as we reach Sunday with McCaffrey and Kamara, who are right on his tail. But all of this is really just solidifying Adrian Peterson more for me. I mean, he is my stone cold lock this week at running back. Um, I would really much rather him be at 6,500, not because I think that he is going to return $6,500 value, like, 15 points. Like, I could see him giving us another 20 pointer. The thing is, I don't know. Like, I like cheap Adrian Peterson. I miss it. And 7,500 is not cheap, but it's a lot better than having to go to 8,500, for Kareem Hunt. So I guess if I were to rank these guys, excluding Gurley, um, considering price as well, I'd probably go Peterson, uh, Peterson, Kamara, McCaffrey. And then what comes after? Let's throw all those guys out of the picture. Obviously, I mentioned Latavius Murray, but a couple interesting guys here. I'm seeing Kenyon Drake making some movement here, up 25% from 5 to 7. That's a nice bump. So Kenyon Drake going against the Jets. I mean, the guy has game breaking ability. Makes some boneheaded plays once in a while. And obviously, Adam Gaze is not interested in just giving him the keys and letting him go. But one of these days he's gonna, give us a really monster outing. Hopefully it comes here pretty soon because he's still, at a palatable price of 6,900, given his just natural ability to carve up a defense. So just he needs to get the opportunity to, really make me feel good about using him. And then these two guys tied at 8. I mentioned before we have two guys tied at 8. Mark Ingram and Chris Carson. Chris Carson's a bit banged up, but he's getting tons of carries going against the Chargers. The Chargers defense, they're solid. They're not a terrible defense. They're not playing as well as they have in the past year, but Chris Carson, they definitely want him to be a focal point of that Seattle Seahawks offense. And then Mark Ingram, again, it's game script dependent, and if the Saints jump out to a lead, they're going to feed him the ball because they're going to want to keep that Rams offense off the field. So like I said, get Carson in there, or excuse me, get Ingram in there if you are feeling good about the Saints getting out to that lead, and just remember, it's all about game script with him. Nick Chubb has seen a big move up, 59% from 3.8 to 6, so Chubb is trending at 6,600. Tariq Cohen is trending in that um, awesome Bears offense. I never thought I'd utter those words, but the Bears offense is amazing. Uh, they are legit, and Tariq Cohen is a huge part of that. And Jordan Howard, big bump up as well at 46% from 3 to 4.4%. So those are some of your ancillary plays. Philip Lindsay, Peyton Barber, James Conner, obviously are definitely playable. But for me, it all starts with Adrian Peterson, baby. I love him, and it's not my Redskins bias talking, I promise. At wide receiver, no surprises here. Adam Thielen leads the way. Um, for some reason he opened at 15.9%, but he's moved up significantly. 50% move up to 24%. So Adam Thielen is squarely in play, like always, as a super high floor, super safe wide receiver play. But now at 8,900, you got to keep in mind that though he is really safe, he can hamstrung you based on what you can do in your other spots because he's so expensive. And you know that he is going to be probably the highest, if not, I mean, top three, if not the highest owned receiver. But rostering him feels like rostering a expensive running back. It just feels so easy. Devin Funchess is number two. I do think that it makes sense to play him. 6,400 is an easy play. That's not a bank breaker whatsoever. However, it is worth mentioning that he is not eating up tons of targets. You got to keep in mind that Christian McCaffrey is going to get his. You got to keep in mind that Greg Olson is going to get his. And then DJ Moore is moving up in the pecking order. So there are guys that he is competing with. And I think he is indeed going to be a really popular play, a 20% play in a lot of single entry GPPs, perhaps even higher in cash games. So I don't want to say he's a fade, but I am treading lightly because it's no guarantee that, he gets you even a 16, 17 point game. Um, he's got to get into the end zone, I think, because the volume and that Carolina offense, just don't think it's going to be there for him to get you 8, 9 catches for 100 yards. So I'm going to be careful with Devin Funches. One guy that I do really like coming off that injury is Cooper Cup. I think he's just going to slot right in and be an awesome option, just again, right from the get go. He's practiced in full, and ownership is showing that there's something to it. He's moved up 68.5%. That is the second biggest move of viable plays behind Devontae Parker and Jakeem Grant. I don't think he's a viable play. I don't really think Devontae Parker is a viable play either, to be honest with you. Even though I think that he's going to have some ownership based on people box score chasing after he balled out last week. But Cooper Cup is really moving in his ownership projections, and I think that it is legit. I think it's viable to play him. He's got that role on that offense as like the number two red zone option behind Gurley on that team, and we know that the Rams get in the red zone a lot. So definitely liking Cooper Cup at 6,800. Smith is at number four. I like Traquan as a as a player, as a dynasty option. As a DFS option, I like him too. I love that price, 5,100. I like the fact that he's on the field for a lot of snaps. But snaps are not the end all be all. The guy's got to get work, and he is not even close to being the top guy on that team. He's gonna fall behind Michael Thomas. He's gonna fall behind Alvin Kamara, perhaps even Mark Ingram, and perhaps even Benjamin Watson. And so it's important just to keep in mind that he is cheap. He is on a great team, and he's going to be in a shootout affair, but he's going to be heavily owned because he's so cheap. And like I said before, he is one of the keys to getting to Todd Gurley. So I think it is just important to keep in mind that he is going to be popular. You're not going to be sneaky by getting him in there. So don't trick yourself thinking you're getting sneaky here. People know who Traquan is. He plays for the Saints. It's a high total game, and he's getting touted. He's moving up significantly, a 50% move from Wednesday to Friday. So just be careful, okay? I'm not saying don't use him, just temper your expectations. Who do you use instead? You could use Cortland Sutton. I like Cortland Sutton. I like him more as a player. He's a beast. He's got that high football IQ. He played defense all the way up until his sophomore year of college when SMU moved into wide receiver. So he's got a really good mind for what the defense is trying to do. He's a smart player and he's got that physical ability too. 6'4", 220. He's just a beast. And he's the de facto number two guy on that team now that the Broncos got rid of Demarius. But again, 5,500. He's cheap. People are going to gravitate towards him. And Houston is no cupcake. So I like Cortland Sutton. I love the guy as a prospect, but he and Traquan are going to be popular. So the guy that I think is a better pivot, this is just my opinion. I think that we are going to see of that trio, Traquan, Cortland Sutton, and DJ Moore. I think we can see DJ Moore being the lower owned player of the three. And so for me, I think that that is a great cash pivot and GPP pivot. Great cash pivot because people are going to get Traquan and Sutton in there in cash. They're going to want to get those guys in there because they're going to want to pay up at running back and quarterback. And so, what you want to do, given the fact that wide receiver has more variance than those other two positions, you want to use that variance to your advantage and you want to use that ownership leverage to your advantage. So keep DJ Moore on your radar. I think that he's a great play because he's right there in that price range, literally like right in between Traquan and Sutton at 5,300. And yeah, he's moving up. He's trending up. He's gone up from 11 to 12.5%. It's a 13.7% move. But I do think in lower dollar tournaments, he's going to be, perhaps 9, 10% owned. I don't think he has the cachet as far as popularity at this point in the season than do Traquan and Sutton. Maybe if you ask people back in April or July, name one of these three guys as the most popular, they'd probably say DJ Moore. But right now, in the middle of the season, I think that he's kind of fallen behind Sutton and Traquan as that popular rookie receiver. I do think that DJ has the ability to give us an awesome uh, performance for less ownership. All right. Couple other guys that I'm into this week based on my model of ownership movement here. Michael Thomas comes in there at number 5, tied with a few guys. He's tied with Robert Woods, DJ Moore, as far as his ownership and the movement of his ownership from Wednesday to Friday. He's actually gone down 5%. It's not a big move at all, just from 21.1 to 20. He's still slated to be your second highest owned receiver. But with Michael Thomas, I think that, he's due to come down a little bit in that salary. 8,600 is really expensive. And he has not been eating like he was early in the season. Lately, he's frankly been a bit pedestrian. And so I think there is some risk involved with getting him in there. I think people are still riding that train, and for me, I'm not interested in paying up at receiver other than Adam Thielen. So I don't see any reason whatsoever for me to even think about using Michael Thomas. I know it's a little crazy to say out loud to some of you, but that's just how I feel. I think Adam Thielen is just on a heater this year. MVP candidate, and I just don't see any reason to go in any other direction at that price point for wide receiver. So for me, it's a no go on Michael Thomas. Definitely no go for Julio and DeAndre Hopkins. Mike Evans, I like a bit more. Um, but for me, I think it's Thielen or bust if I'm paying up at wide receiver, which I don't even know if I'm going to. There's a lot of nice mid-range guys here. Sammy Watkins, obviously at 6,700. Playing for this high octane Chiefs. Um, you could look at Emmanuel Sanders, who I mentioned it last week. Um, you know, when you play NBA DFS, one of the rookie mistakes a lot of people do is when a star sits, gets scratched, gets hurt, whatever, they immediately want to go the um, to the backup. They say, "Let's go to the backup. Let's go to the guy who's the next man up." But really, that is just more usage, more looks for the other star. And is Emmanuel Sanders a star in this league? I wouldn't say he's a star in this league, but he's definitely, um, the most accomplished, high profile offensive player on that Broncos team. And so Demarius leaving, yes, it opens up the door for Cortland Sutton, but we're talking about a veteran, potentially Pro Bowl caliber receiver in Emmanuel Sanders. And I think that this is going to open up more looks for him. Yes, it's going to open up more looks for Cortland Sutton. Of course, it is. It's not, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. However, keep in mind that Manny Sanders is going to see more attention from his quarterback. 42% move from Wednesday to Friday. And that to me is signaling that that's the case as well. It's interesting that Cortland Sutton has gone down from 18 to 15, but Manny has gone up from 5 to 8. So I think Manny at 7,100 is an awesome pivot off of Sutton. Yes, you're paying up 1,600 bucks, but in tournaments, it's a sharp play going for Emmanuel Sanders over Cortland Sutton. Maybe pairing Emmanuel Sanders up with DJ Moore. Uh, Pretty sharp, if you ask me. And we can go down the list more, what to do with Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones. Um, it's definitely Galladay for me. What to do with Keenan Allen? Like, when is the guy going to, start hogging up 10, 11, 12 catches? I don't know. What do we think about Tyreek Hill? His ownership has tanked from 12.5 to 9%. Stephon Diggs, 12.5 to 8%. These guys are dropping 25, 30%. What do we think about Cheetah and Diggs? Those guys are going to be very low owned and they have 30-point upside. So maybe getting a little Tyreek and Stephon Diggs in your lineups and your GPPs. But for me, in cash games, I'm all about Cooper Cup. I love him this week. I feel really good about Adam Thielen. And then after that, it's kind of a crapshoot, like always with wide receiver. But I really like DJ Moore too. Nearing the end here with tight end, David Njoku is our number one guy as far as his ownership plus movement. He's gone up 44.7% from Wednesday to Friday. He started at 9. Now he's up to 13.5. That's a pretty significant move. But nobody's moved up more than OJ Howard. OJ Howard has gone up from 1.9% on Wednesday to 6.8% on Friday. That's a 249% move. The last time I saw a guy like move up that significantly with that kind of talent um, was on Johnson when he went bananas for like 150 yards and a couple scores. I think OJ Howard is an outstanding play at tight end this week. Yeah, I love Kelsey. Who doesn't? I love Greg Olson and that shootout. Well, not shootout, but the Panthers could put up 5 touchdowns this week. I love Greg Olson. I like Njoku. Hopefully, the Browns with their cleaning out the coaching staff smarten up and just continue to give this guy double-digit targets. He's very inefficient, but if he can get 10 targets, he's got all the athletic ability in the world to do whatever he wants to whomever he wants. Kyle Rudolph and Trey Burton are both fine tight ends, but I really like OJ Howard just as a player, as a dynasty prospect, and with Fitzpatrick in there, I think that he's an outstanding option. And Austin Hooper, too, 129% move from 1.8% to 4%. Um, I like him as well. He's got a role in that offense now, finally, and Matt Ryan looks for him in the red zone and midfield, and he can get you 100 yards at the tight end position. But for me, I like OJ Howard a lot at 6K on FanDuel. I think he's an awesome play. And if you really want to dumpster dive, I mean, Joku's only 5,200. But perhaps Jeff Hireman on the Broncos. He's not a terrible play at 4,600. And with Demarius out of the picture, it just might open up another target or two per game for him. Vance McDonald, Ben Watson, they're fine as well. I don't know about Jordan Reed, but he's got all the talent in the world, but that offense is boring as shit. That's my team. So take that for what it's worth. And then to wrap things up here, and then we'll hit the road. The number one owned defense this week, without a doubt, is going to be the Chicago Bears at 5,400 smackaroos. They've gone up from Wednesday to Friday, 68% from 7 to 11.7. But if you want to save $2,000, do you want to save $2,000? Yes, you want to save $2,000. Go for the Denver Broncos against the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson is always good for a turnover, averages over a turnover a game for his career. And the Broncos have the track record of being able to tie one on an opposing offense. They put up 34 points, 34 fantasy points against the Cardinals. The Texans are not the Cardinals, but the Texans do give up turnovers. So the Broncos at 3,400 are a glaring value. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Baltimore defense is a fine GPP play. They play well against Pittsburgh. Those games rarely ever shoot out at 3,500. It's worth a try, but I'm not going there. For me, it's the Broncos. I'm all about the Broncos. I like the Dolphins going against the Jets, but the Jets have shown the ability to score points this year. So I don't know. That divisional matchup, however, with Miami and New York is interesting. Kansas City going against Cleveland. I don't mind it. But I'd rather go to Denver for 500 less. I think that's about it for tonight. Why don't you guys give me a follow on Twitter if you haven't yet, at Josh Fern, JoshFern, Rotowan, ROTO_WAN, DFS Spectre. Ryan's the man. Been here since day one. DFS Spectre, DFSSPECTRE, and Take No Days Off. Jeremy's the man. Makes great models. Crushes DFS. Take No Days Off is the handle. Follow Lineup Logic on Twitter and subscribe to us, please, on Patreon. We're just regular ass dudes trying to get a buck here and there for the time we put into this. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Good luck this week. Make some fucking money, baby. Let's go. Week 9. We're halfway done. Let's do the damn thing. Good luck. See ya.